Hi, welcome to Dr. Mark's Music Notes. I'm Dr. Mark Runkles, and today we're going to learn about the history of Western classical music. The classical era, from 1750 to 1800, began to standardize what would become the modern symphony orchestra. Using the string choir as the core, pairs of various woodwind and brass instruments were added along with percussion. Classical composers simplified harmonies and largely abandoned complicated contrapuntal textures. Philosophically, they were interested in simplicity, beauty, and clarity. Clarity is exhibited in the developing musical forms, especially sonata allegro form, which would dominate Western classical music through the early 1900s. Several important composers of the classical era included Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, Johann Christian Bach, Franz Joseph Haydn, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Ludwig van Beethoven. For the classical era, I've selected Theobald von Ohr's Weimar's Courtyard of the Muses. The Romantic era, from 1800 to 1900, grew out of the Enlightenment and revolutions against European monarchies. At this time, the Industrial Revolution was also breaking down agrarian traditions. The term Romantic comes from the medieval romance, a chivalric tale written in vernacular and often involving a quest. The term held a negative connotation at the time, as medieval romances were viewed as wild, fanciful, and false. Romanticism became a philosophical and cultural movement. Musically, composers pushed at the boundaries established in classicism. Through music, Romantic composers were attempting to express the concept of the Romantic sublime, which additionally presents the opposite side of the coin to classicism's beauty, simplicity, and clarity. Forms were now expanded and obscured. Modulations were often to foreign keys instead of to closely related keys. A few important Romantic composers include Ludwig van Beethoven, Gioacchino Rossini, Frédéric Chopin, Richard Wagner, Johannes Brahms, and Gustav Mahler. For the Romantic era, I've selected Caspar David Friedrich's Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog. Whereas the Romantic composers stretched classical ideals to their limits, the modern era, from about 1900 through today, broke those limits. The modern era is extremely complex, and a lot of different ideas and schools are lumped into it. For now, we'll mostly focus on the tonal boundaries being demolished, where the freedom of dissonance led to atonality. Serialism occurs in music in which any element has been organized into a specific order. That order has to be completed before any part of that element can be repeated. The most common serialized element is pitch, but other elements could include rhythm, dynamics, or articulation. For example, if I wrote a C, I would have to go through all the other notes in that series before another C could be repeated. This is called 12-tone music in pieces where all 12 of the pitches in an octave make up a series. The 12-tone composition method was invented by Arnold Schoenberg in the 1920s. Extended instrumental techniques also begin to appear in the modern era compositions. Some of these techniques include multiphonics, prepared piano, flutter tongue, and the altissimo register. Important composers of the modern era include Claude Debussy, Arnold Schoenberg, Igor Stravinsky, Maurice Ravel, Dmitri Shostakovich, Aaron Copland, Charles Ives, Philip Glass, and John Adams. For the modern era, I've chosen Gustav Klimt's The Kiss. I hope you found this overview of the history of Western classical music informative. We've barely scratched the surfaces of these 6 eras, and I will focus on each era in more detail in the future. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions, and click the subscribe button for notifications about more information on the oboe and other musical topics. Thanks for watching. Play on.